Hey everyone, I am here to talk about something that every author I know should do more of. Some of you are doing none of it. Some of you are doing like this much of it. Some of you are doing a decent amount of it, but it isn't all that often I see someone who's really doing it the right way, the ideal way to get their book in front of more people, to get more people to buy the book, to have more people who are impacted by the book. So if you are going to take the time and the energy to write a book, and we all know that that takes a lot of time and energy, then please, please watch this, listen, and implement. I'm Christy Dosh. I am the founder of Guide My Brand, a boutique PR agency that works with entrepreneurs and nonfiction authors. I am a nonfiction author myself. I've had 2 book deals with 2 decent-sized commercial publishers. And so I know a little bit about what it's like to be on the author side. And as a publicist, I know very well what it's like to be on the marketing side and trying to get the word out there about your book. In fact, we're working on a few different book campaigns right now, so it is fresh in my head. And here is the thing you're not doing enough of. You are not talking about your book enough before it comes out. You're not starting early enough. You're not talking about it enough times. You need to eat, sleep, live, breathe this book from the day that you decide to write it and the day that the book actually comes out. So I get asked a lot about book marketing timelines. And in fact, I just got done developing a 90-day, 120, and 180-day timeline to put in my group program for people to use. Those are minimums. I actually will not work with an author if it is less than 90 days before their book comes out. In fact, I have talked several people recently into moving their publication date back a little bit so that we can have the time to get those PR opportunities that are going to get more people buying the book and more people who are actually impacted by the book. Because again, if you're going to take the time and the effort to write this book, why aren't you taking the time and the effort to market it, to make sure that it gets into the hands of the people who need this book? If you're watching live and you've got a book coming out, let me know when your book is coming out. I would love to know where everybody's at in their sort of stage or process. If you don't have a date yet, just let me know that you are working on your book. So as I said, we don't work with people unless they give us at least 90 days before their book comes out. And that is a bare minimum. 90 days, I am like scrambling around. I'm a chicken with my head cut off. I am trying to scrape together publicity opportunities. 90 days is a bare minimum because when you start pitching for podcast interviews or guest blogs or reviews, interviews, all these types of things that you would love to have before your book actually comes out, as you're pitching for those, remember, you've got to give time for the person to actually reply to you. So for example, if we pitched a podcast today, they might not respond to us for a week, maybe even 2 weeks. It might take a follow-up email in 10 to 14 days. And so maybe it's 3 weeks before we hear from them. Okay, then they say, yes, they'd love to have our client on. Well, now they're going to send us their scheduler. They might not have an open time on their schedule for another 2 or 3 weeks or a month. Okay, then you go record the interview. Then they've got to put it into post-production and get it ready to actually go live. In the meantime, they interviewed other people before you who are already slotted into their schedule. So from the time that we pitch a podcast interview till the time that it actually goes live for people to hear it, it can be months. And that's why I say you've got to start at a bare minimum 90 days before your book comes out if you want these interviews and features to come out right around the book launch, which is what we all want. Because when you have that big launch on your launch day or during your launch week, that is your best opportunity to land on a bestseller list, whether that's Amazon or it's USA Today or it's the New York Times. The best shot you have at it is during that launch week. So you've got to line up all your publicity to happen during launch week and like launch day, maybe even the day before launch. You can't do that if you're starting less than 90 days out. I have people come to me all the time who tell me their book is coming out next week or it's coming out in 30 days, and I tell them there's nothing I can do for them because there's not. Now, there are some things I can do. You can still get publicity after your book comes out, but the best opportunity to get publicity for your book is going to be before your launch date. Diana says, I have that problem with musicians who think the CD just goes to print and then out into the world and that's it. Yes, Diana, you get me. It is exactly like that. So I want you to start at least, and I'm telling you, 90 days is bare minimum. That is doing the least amount you can do for your book is 90 days. I would love for it to be 120 or 180 days. I'd love for it to be even more. So let me tell you about how the marketing for my last book worked and why it worked in terms of actually selling books and producing for me. I started talking about my book 2 years, almost 3 years actually, before the book came out. From the day I came up with the idea for the book till the day I held it in my hands was 3 years. That's not uncommon for something that's commercially published. You have to write a nonfiction proposal. That takes some time. You shop around for a literary agent. That takes time. The literary agent shops it to publishers. That takes time. It gets to the publisher. They give you direction for how they want the book to progress, how they want you to write the book, then you go write it. So I spent the better part of a year doing all the research required because it wasn't a book. I know a lot of you write books where it's memoir or it's kind of personal development, self-help. You're talking a lot about your own journey. My books happen to be about the business of sports. Some of you know I was ESPN sports business reporter before I went into PR, and prior to that, I was with Forbes. I'm actually with Forbes again. So mine required a lot of research. That's why it took me a year to write it. And then there's another year from like the time you turn in the draft till it's an actual book, because it goes through various stages of editing. I had to do some rewrites. We were cover designing. There were all these things that happened. So 3 years from the day I came up with the idea till the day I held the book in my hand. Now, self-publishing and going through independent publishers can be faster. I'm not telling you it's going to take you 3 years. However, I started talking about the book from like the moment I conceived of it. Like I can remember tweeting about the book, I think before I had a literary agent, before I had a publisher. I certainly was talking about it once I got a publisher and could say that I had this book deal. I was talking about the title. When I would do interviews, and I was kind of naturally getting interviews already because of my position as a sports business reporter, but when I was doing interviews and people would say, how would you like us to title you? That's like now, you know, people would say, Christy Dosh, founder and publicist, Guide My Brand. I had people title me for years, you guys, years before my book came out. I had people titling me in articles, Christy Dosh, author of the forthcoming book, Saturday Millionaires. Years. So people knew this book was coming out for quite some time before it actually came out. I was able to build this like fan base of people. I had this audience who was ready, willing, and able to buy the book, who knew for years, okay, or at least months, depending on how long they've been following me, that this book was going to come out. They knew the title, they knew what it was going to be about. I had shared little excerpts that I had approved with my publisher. I had talked through some of the ideas on social media. I had included some of the data I was using in the book in the articles I was writing. And I think where some of you get hung up is you're afraid to give away too much. You're afraid to talk about too much, and then maybe people won't want to buy the whole book. The opposite is true. I gave away huge chunks of the stuff that was in my book in dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of blogs and radio interviews and podcast interviews and TV appearances and speaking engagements in the 2 years from when I like started really writing the book until the book came out. Now, if you had followed me that time and you consumed everything I ever put out, you probably got a good chunk of my book. But you know what? You probably still bought the book, because if you followed me for that long, you were really interested in the subject. And when it came out in one neat, tidy little package where you could read it all in one place, you probably bought it. It also gave me time to set up newspaper interviews. I was quoted in the New York Times. I was quoted in the Washington Post. I was quoted, actually an entire feature was done on my book in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I was quoted in dozens of newspapers across the country. I was doing radio interviews, podcast interviews, TV appearances, speaking gigs, all by putting myself out there as the future author of a book. You don't have to wait till your book's out to get those kind of opportunities. I did it by putting myself out there as the future author of the forthcoming book. And people were happy to have me to talk about those topics. And all along, I'm building buzz for the book so that people actually want to buy it when it comes out. And so I was able to get this momentum for the book long before the book ever actually came to fruition. And then there were all these people willing and ready to buy it. It also gave me time to research some outside of the box kind of ideas for how to market my book. So one of the most successful ways I marketed my book was by reaching out to college professors who taught in sports management programs, particularly in sport finance classes, and pitching them to use my book as a text in their course. So my book was used in dozens of college classrooms across the country. Do you know what it does for your book sales when students have to buy your book? Pretty awesome, actually. And while that might not be right for everyone's book, I bet there are a lot of you out there who have a book that would be right for those type of situations. I've worked with clients who maybe it didn't make sense in a university classroom, but maybe there was a trade organization they could partner with where their book made sense. I had one that we were getting her books into nursing homes because it was like for families of people who had elder relatives and who were caretakers. So think outside of the box. It's not just podcast interviews and speaking engagements and TV appearances. I mean, all that stuff is great, and absolutely. Not only can you get all of that stuff as an author, but I'm telling you, you can get all of that stuff before the book is published, and you should be getting that stuff before the book is published. You should not be waiting till after. It is actually easier to get publicity before the book comes out than it is after. So I encourage you, start talking about your book early and often. Start pitching for publicity around your book long before the book ever actually exists. And look for those outside of the box type opportunities like I was talking about with college classrooms, or I mentioned the client that went into nursing homes. I mean, there are a lot of outside of the box opportunities to find ways to collaborate with other organizations or other people to promote your book. But you've got to start planning that in advance. Ideally, I tell clients 6 months before the publication date. I would love if it was more than that, but I have trouble convincing people to do 6 months. They're calling me a week before their book comes out or 30 days before their book comes out. So start talking about your book early and often. In fact, as soon as you decide you're writing the book, start talking about it. You can tease things along the way. You can ask for help coming up with your title. You can do a contest to pick your cover design. You can do a big unveiling of your cover design. There are all these ways to talk about your book for months. And I told you I did it for years before my book came out. So I encourage you to do it early and often. I promise you, you will see better results. You'll see more sales. You'll get more opportunities like speaking and TV and that kind of stuff. And you'll be able to impact more people with your book. So I hope that you were able to take something away from this. If you've got something that you want me to cover in an upcoming live, I will be going live another probably couple of times this week, and I'm focusing on book marketing this week. So definitely if you've got something book marketing related, let me know, and I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day.